What's up? This is Barton Simmons. That's Bud Elliott. This is the Barton and Bud Show. We're coming at you midweek here after a fantastic weekend of football. SEC kickoff. Now we get SEC week 2. We get more interconference matchups. We reacted to the week. Now we're going to look ahead to next weekend. Bud, how are you? Are you ready for another great slate?
Dude, I'm doing well. I was doing our podcast listening, so I took my son to the park this morning. We didn't even need to go into the park because he got to see this crew chop down this enormous tree and then chop it up, and then they used a big claw truck to put it in to the truck, so that was cool. I listened to an episode of our USC podcast, The Peristyle, and sat there with them as we watched that magic happen. And I'm excited to break down this slate, kind of say what we're looking forward to, take a mailbag question, do the one big recruiting thing. And I'm excited that on version 2.0 of this recording, your internet is holding steady. So how's things in the Simmons household?
Don't jinx it. Things in the Simmons household are great. As you know, we looked at a house today, even though we just moved into a new house. I don't want to go too deep into our reasoning for looking into a house, but let's just say my wife is finicky, and her feelings change quickly about her domicile, and so you know what? We're always on the market. So as long as I don't move before the end of the day, I'll still have a good spot to watch football this weekend, I think.
It's always scary when you get that, your wife's name has favorited a house on Zillow email. I'm like, wait, what? We just moved. Yeah.
Right.
Oh man.
Right.
Yeah. If you guys are not listening or not watching on the YouTube version of this, Barton's face right now is awesome.
It's you never know what you're gonna get. It's all sort of like I'm always kind of like Big 12 football. You never quite know what you're gonna get on any given week or any given day. So, hey, that's why we like it. Why we like college football. That's why we like Haley. So you know what? Let's figure out what we're gonna get this weekend. Bud, where you want? What's the game? Maybe we'll go chronologically, morning to evening for anyone that's trying to kind of schedule their. You're an organized guy, trying to schedule out their day in the proper way. What's the first itch you want to scratch?
So, like, if you had to kind of block out some time on a Saturday to go house shopping, right? I think
Yes.
I think when you want to get this done is in the morning, right? Because I look at this noon Eastern slate, 11 for you Central Timers, and I really only see one game that I'm all that interested in. But I need to make sure that I can be on the couch, largely undisturbed for the afternoon and for the evening slate. So let's go ahead and start with that nooner if you're somebody who's going to be parking your butt on the couch, and that's Texas TCU, man. Both teams coming off games where do they deserve to win? Do they deserve to lose? Kind of debatable, I guess. Texas takes care of TCU or Texas Tech in an absolute shootout that was largely kind of field position based. Their offense didn't even look that good, and TCU loses to Iowa State after their defense gets totally torched. And I'm interested to see what we're going to have come of this one. So my first, I know we always play instead of like what will happen, but kind of like what we want to learn. Is Max Duggan, is he going to play like this? Because they inserted him in the second half of that game. I didn't even think he was going to play at all. And he goes 16 of 19 for 241 against Iowa State's defense. Like, if he plays a full game, that's what, 32 of 38 for 480. Yeah, that's pretty solid right there. That's my first real question for this one. And my other question is kind of about TCU too. Is their defense going to suck? Like they got lit up by Iowa State with the big play. I think about half of Iowa State's yards came on just 5 plays against TCU. And I want to see, can Texas be explosive? We saw Brennan Eagles this week get moved up on the depth chart above Tariq Black. And Texas needs a few more explosive plays on offense if they want to get out of that league unscathed. So that's kind of what I'm going to be watching for in that
one. There's a few explosive plays baked into these numbers I'm about to tell you, but it was startling to see what TCU's defense did on first against Iowa State. Iowa State on first down, they had 13 rushes for 172 yards, averaged 13 yards a rush on first down. Okay. And so, again, maybe there's a couple of big plays in there that skew those numbers. But how about passing? On first down, Iowa State's 9 of 11 for 106 yards. Like, I'm not sure what's what up here on TCU's defense, because that's if you are preseason expecting a lot out of TCU, I think it's defensive motivated, because there's a lot to like about this team defensively. There's some really good linebackers. They've got some good defensive linemen. They've got one of the best safety duos in the country, and Gary Patterson was understandably upset after last game with regard to just the played, and particularly how they stopped the run, which they didn't do much of. So it is going to be interesting to see what TCU can muster defensively. Now, in terms of the Max Duggan thing, yeah, like we always were, I think, optimistic about what Max Duggan was going to do, how he was going to improve, evolve. And I think that, yeah, like jumped off the bench, like he didn't even start. I mean, if they really expected him to be ready, I assume he would have started. So he kind of came up, I guess, half prepared for this, and then was fantastic. I think the side of it, there's two parts of it that aren't surprising about this. One is that just we like Max Duggan, we like his upside, we like his potential, and the other one is an area that TCU is very talented, even when you consider what they lost from last year's team, Jalen Reagor in particular, is wide receiver. Like they have very good players at the wide receiver position. A couple of those are young, a couple of those are freshmen, but they've got really talented players at wide receiver. So if Max Duggan can be a consistent quarterback, that offense can be great. And I don't know what's going to go on with the running back position, because it's it doesn't seem like they're giving a lot of carries to their best players at the running back, or the most talented players at the running back position right now for TCU. But for a Texas defense that just got torched last week against Texas Tech, there's plenty of reason to be a little bit cautious about what you're about to face in regards to TCU's ability to throw the ball.
Yeah, I am not in a race to go out and lay 13 points with Texas against this. I mean, if you tell me Texas is up 18 going to the fourth, I'm really not very comfortable if they're going to be able to hold that lead and cover that line. Man, I was surprised that TCU's defense got lit up with explosive plays as bad as it did. And look, we focused on the 5 real explosives for Iowa State, and I think with good reason. I mean, those are if you have half your yards on 5 plays, that's a pretty big deal. But at the same time, 1 in 6 plays for Iowa State was an explosive play. That's like unheard of. Yeah. I mean, I go over all these box scores. Guys, 1 in 6 being explosive is not something that is normal, nor it's probably not sustainable either. So I do think TCU's defense will probably improve a little bit. But if you're going to watch a nooner, I think this is exciting because there are legitimately questions on both sides of the ball for each team about a team that we think are going to be somewhere between good and really good, especially if Duggan happens to play, keep playing well for TCU. So that's my pick for the noon slate. There's gonna be a lot of weeks this year where I'm really dedicated to watching the noon slate. This is not necessarily one of those weeks because we have some bangers later on in the slate.
I do think before we get to the afternoon slate, which is a little bit more compelling, I think Florida, South Carolina is another one that's going to be instructive, because it's like South Carolina, Tennessee are in a lot of ways sort of the same team, and they're the same team regardless of the year. Whether they're having a good year or a bad year, like they all just sort of games, and it's kind of ugly football and figure out a way. But last week was really promising with regard to Florida and their offense. South Carolina will put up a better fight defensively And so if Florida does if they put another big number up against South Carolina, then, get ready for the hype train. Get ready for Georgia to be a distant, second in all the mid-season prognostications. Like, this is going to be, I think, a really interesting week to find out how for real Florida is. So there's more games I like, but South Carolina is absolutely going to be a good measuring stick in a way I don't think Ole Miss was for Florida.
What does that number have to get to for you to take the Gamecocks?
I mean, I'm thinking about taking them right now. I'm just not sure. I mean, it's 17.5 is what I'm seeing right now. Like, I'm not sure how much we can really gauge off of that Ole Miss. Like, that Ole Miss defense was not good. And I just think South Carolina is I think that they'll try to slow the game down and I don't know, like, what is this series at? I would have to look at what this series has been looking at recently between Will Muschamp and Dan Mullen, but that just feels like a very big number based on a lopsided week 1 win that was or just didn't get much resistance.
So I can think of some games. I don't remember what the exact scores were in my mind where South Carolina kept it pretty close for a while and stop me if you've heard this before. But then they kind of got down there in the red zone and had a critical turnover, and then they committed a silly penalty, which was sort of an emotional penalty. And then all of a sudden Florida pulls away. And then I think maybe either Florida or South Carolina got away with like a crazy block in the back that sprung somebody for a long play. This might have been last year's game. I'm trying to remember which one that was. Looking at here for the series, what do we have?
35-31, 38-27, and then 2019 was
2019, 38-27, 2018, 35-31.
So what was 2017?
2017 was Florida lost 20-28.
Yeah, so those are the three. I mean, those are 3 competitive games.
Yeah.
I'm just a little bit. I'm just surprised. 17.5 is a big number.
Mullen has, twice put 35 plus on Muschamp in 2 meetings though. So I would want to go back and look to see how Mullen did in prior Mississippi State when he faced a Muschamp defense. Because certainly we know some other guys in that coaching tree, Saban's defense, Kirby's defense, has really owned what Mullen does on offense, but he's had Muschamp's number for sure the last 2 years. I don't disagree with you, by the way, on taking the 18. I would love to see if Florida could steam a little bit more and get to 20. Although this opened, I think, 19.5, and so it's actually been bet down a little bit. So I guess we'll see what this thing does. I just personally right now it's kind of in a dead zone for me. I don't really feel the need to rush out and take 18 at this point. Like, I don't think it's going to move against me that much. And if it does, that's fine. I'm not going to get really pissed that I missed it. Here's a game I can't miss though. Can we say this is for the SEC West? Maybe a little bit too early to say that, but this is a huge deciding game in that division, man. 3:30 CBS game. We're company men. We're going to deep dive this a little bit. Texas A&M, Alabama. 17.5 point spread right now. 3:30 kick. Bama looked, honestly, their starters look pretty damn dominant over Missouri in week 1. A&M, as far as yards per play, kind of dominated Vanderbilt in the same way, except they did not translate it to the scoreboard at all. They beat them 17-12 as opposed to the pretty comfortable win that Alabama had. And I was playing around, and I've known this to be true just intrinsically before, but I never really looked up exactly the stuff. I've got one question for you here in this game. Can Texas A&M's receivers win one-on-one battles on the outside against Bama? That's it. So Nick has lost 23 games as head coach of the Tide. I'm going to take out 6 of those because it was year 1. I really don't care. He didn't have his system fully installed, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to take out the 2 Sugar Bowl losses, the Oklahoma and the Utah, when their fans say they really didn't care about the game. I think that might be kind of BS a little bit, but for this argument, let's wipe those. So that leaves us with 15 losses Nick Saban has had. I found a pretty common trend in 14 of those 15. And then we'll spot the game which didn't have this, and I think we'll figure out why. So check this out. It's not mobile quarterback play because Alabama's lost to mobile quarterbacks. He's lost to pocket passers. It's not the ability to run a whole lot, or to escape the pocket. It's really not that. The one commonality I found in 14 of these 15 losses, dude, is that their DBs get beat by guys who are really talented players. And oftentimes by guys who a year or two later were like, damn, that dude ended up being really good. And now he's actually starting on my fantasy football team in the NFL. So here's the list. Ready? 2008, they lose to UF, Percy Harvin, Louis Murphy, Aaron Hernandez. Not a bad skill trio there. 2009, they don't lose. 2010, Jordan Jefferson goes for 10.8 yards per attempt. The guy doing almost all that damage, Ruben Randall, who played for 8 years now, maybe 9 in the NFL. South Carolina beats him in 2010 as well. A little guy named Alshon Jeffrey, catching passes from Steven Garcia. I think history proved out that there was probably more to do with Jeffrey just mossing dudes in that game. I think he went for almost $150. 2011 LSU, this is the 9-6 game, so you don't really think about this being receivers. But as far as yards per attempt, when they were throwing to Randall and a guy named Odell Beckham Jr., actually pretty high. Now, they didn't score, 9-6, but it still kind of fits. 2012, dude named Mike Evans wasn't bad, and they had a couple other guys who had a cup of coffee in the NFL there too. 2013, Sammy Coates for Auburn, Ricardo Lewis. They both kind of busted in the NFL, but they were, second and fourth round picks, I believe, and they were pretty good receivers at Auburn for having a guy who was really a cornerback in Nick Marshall throwing in the ball. 2014, Ole Miss, a couple guys named Evan Ingram and Laquan Treadwell, both really good college players, both drafted fairly highly, and Ingram is still kicking around in the league. I don't know if Treadwell is or not. He might still be on a team.
I think he's in there somewhere. I just don't think he's doing much. But he was a first round pick, right? So
yeah. 2014 Ohio State. This one actually I think of as kind of the Zeke game, but the dudes that Cardale Jones was thrown to, Michael Thomas, may have heard of him, Curtis Samuel, and a guy named Devin Smith, who didn't really do anything so far in the NFL, but was actually like a top 40 pick, I believe. The Jets took him in round 2. 2015 Ole Miss, Evan Ingram, Laquan Treadwell, and then Cody Core went off in that game, and he was actually a 6th round pick. 2016 Clemson, you guys will know these names. Deion Kane, Jordan Leggett, Mike Williams, Hunter Renfrow. 2017 Auburn, Darius Slayton, Kerryon Johnson, who's not a receiver, but he did have some big catches for them in that one. I'm kind of debatable if that one fits, but Slayton certainly had a good game for them. 2018, Ross, Higgins, Renfrow. Next, 2019 LSU, we know who was on that team. And then 2019 Auburn, I think Seth Williams actually had a fairly decent day. So the one loss that Nick has had where I think Bama fans will tell you that his team cared about the loss and beyond his first year, where the team didn't have anybody as far as outside. Any guesses here?
So
the one team to beat him.
20. You tell me.
Cam Newton, 2010 Auburn.
Right. Yeah. So I was trying to remember what the year was. So basically the takeaway is, yeah, sometimes it is a mobile quarterback. But the common thread is the idea that it's not 11 on 11. It's not 11 guys beating 11 guys. It's one guy beating one guy, or one guy doing something sort of outside the structure of the offense to just go make a play. Because if you're just going to bet on your 11 over Alabama's 11, Alabama's got the best 11. They always are going to have the best 11. And as long as Nick Saban is there from a recruiting standpoint. And so do you have a playmaker that can be better than one of their guys? Right? Is that a fair way of summarizing it?
I think so. And Nick is a defensive back coach by trade. Even before he was a DB, DC, he was a DB coach, and he has designed his defense to essentially dare you to beat his guys in one-on-one coverage. Not always man coverage, but typically one-on-one opportunities to the outside, right? And if you can't, night termite, you're not doing it. Like you're not going to beat Alabama, with the exception if you happen to have Cam Newton, then we're going to make an exception for that. But like ultimately, you have got to win those one-on-one battles that Alabama basically sits there and says, you won't beat us enough times on these. And for the most part, man, Nick Saban's like 140-15 if you take out those, those couple games where his team probably didn't care in his first year. He's almost always right about this. When it doesn't happen, it's that the other team has a dude who's both very talented and balled out on that day against him. And this is where I kind of come to A&M. And Jamon Osmond opted out. And Cam Buckley is out for the year with an injury. But I look at their recruiting, dude, and like they have some guys who we rated pretty highly. And yet in the game against Vanderbilt, they didn't create explosive plays through the air. I mean, that was a major issue. And we can argue they were holding stuff back for Bama, and I wouldn't put that past Jimbo Fisher to do. I think he's a smart coach. But at the same time, he has had a reputation for it being tough for freshmen to go in there and grasp that offense, both in College Station and in Tallahassee, and make a real impact early. I mean, we saw Rashad Green do it, but not a lot of other guys have. So, do you think A&M has anybody who can actually threaten Bama on the outside enough for them to have a shot in this game?
Yeah, they got a guy named Damon Demas, who's a true freshman that didn't even play. And Jimbo Fisher, I don't know why he didn't play, but Jimbo Fisher said he just wasn't ready. And I just took a passing look at that 2017 Bama wide receiver class, and those guys all flashed as true freshmen. But game against Florida State, I don't think Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, or Devontae Smith, any of them had a catch. It's like sometimes. So I'll grant you that. Like, it doesn't always have to come game one, and the wide receiver position is sometimes it gets misunderstood as a position where you just sort of roll the ball out there and say, hey, go run a stick route and we'll throw it to you. I mean, there's more to it than that, and particularly in some of these more modern offenses. But I think when that's a deficiency on your roster, because it is, they literally have, I think, like 1 or 2 catches coming back from the wide receiver position from last year. If that's a deficiency on your roster and you've recruited well at the position over the last 2 years, allegedly, like there's, be a good coach and figure out a way for those guys to make impacts, because you're going to your research, like you are going to need those guys to make plays. And Damon Demas, I don't know. I mean, he is very talented. We didn't have him as a 5-star 24/7 Sports because clearly we didn't think he was a sure thing. He's raw. He's a freak athlete, all the way freak. But he is raw, and he is a guy that has been inconsistent as a catcher. He's not super polished as a route runner. But I feel like this is the type of game, if A&M wants to beat Alabama, they need to get a guy like that in there, and they need to draw up a couple shots to him and see if he can go out jump Pat Surtain Jr.
Or Job.
Or Job.
Like I may not. Yeah, exactly. No,
I mean, I'm not. But like,
no, you're right.
They're all good players wherever you go, and so, but do you have but in a game where there may not be a ton of big plays there, can you generate 2 with someone like that on the outside just by letting him go out and be a better athlete than someone? Because there's not, like, as good as Alabama is, as good as Pat Surtain is, and as good as all those guys, like Damon Demas is as good an athlete as you're going to see in the human race. Like, he does things that are not typical of many human beings. And so it's just let's see. I think he's got to figure out a way, to find some big plays in the pass game if he wants to have a chance to win this game. Like, you can't. Jimbo Fisher built this team at Texas A&M in the same way Will Muschamp tried to build South Carolina, in the same way, in some ways, that the Jeremy Pruitt era started at Tennessee. I think they've started to transition a little more the last year or so. In the same way, I don't know if I'd put Ed Orgeron in this mix or not, but like, oh, we got to get bigger. Like we got to build a Bama beaten team, and we got to get bigger and stronger. We can't, we got to get good on the offensive line and good on the defensive line, and all that's important. But I think your point is well taken. That isn't actually how to beat an Alabama team. Like Hugh Freeze had the best success against Alabama, and it was by having really good skill players and an offense that could get them in some one-on-one situations. So I think the Jimbo Fisher Bama beating blueprint is going to be put to the test this week.
I'm interested as well as far as other things we want to learn in this game. How slow will Jimbo go? Right? I mean, he is a guy who already plays a very slow pace. And he is one of the routinely the slowest offenses in the country outside of like Army, Navy, the service academies, and like whatever other triple option teams you want to put in there. When he is outgunned, he has oftentimes cranked that thing. I mean, it's already closer to the turtle on the lawnmower, but he yanks it all the way back. I mean, like we're full on turtle here. Look at the Clemson game last year. What, they have 8 possessions total? I mean, he tries to crank that thing down, and it's not a terrible underdog strategy, to be honest, because the more possessions you have, the more talented team, the better team is more likely to end up, showing its true talent and winning out. But like, it wouldn't surprise me if this game is fairly low scoring. A pretty experienced offensive line for Texas A&M. I know their message board was not very happy with their performance on Saturday with a couple tackles for loss given up and whatnot. And some of that's probably on Kellen Mond too. And I think it's the first time we actually said the name Kellen Mond on this show or on this episode. I mean, they'll need him to play well, but I think that the tempo is something I'm very interested in. And I think Bama's offense is pretty damn good, but I'm not sold on the idea that there's no real drop off from Tua to Mac Jones yet. They were not that consistent against Missouri. They did have a guy named Jalen Waddle who they could just chuck it up to, and he just looks like that much faster than everybody else on the field, and it seems he has hit like the Mario Kart star, whereas everybody else is just in regular mode, and he bails them out.
But hey, what do you think about this? Quickly.
Yeah.
Value on Jalen as a Heisman guy right now.
Ooh,
is that worth throwing? Sprinkle a little bit on, because he's gonna have some sex appeal. He's gonna have flashy plays. He's gonna get return. They're gonna hand him the ball off here and there. They're gonna throw it to him. Obviously, he's gonna get some return yardage. And Alabama might be the best team in the country, but people might be a little reluctant to go hand a Heisman to Mac Jones, right or wrong.
I'm looking for what his odds are, but I think, like, especially if Harris does not emerge as a superstar for them, if he's just to continually be a good, solid player, then yeah, I think there's definitely some value on it, because what he did against Missouri was great, but it wasn't like national highlight reel where everybody notices him, starts to know the name even more. And maybe this is a year a receiver could win. I definitely don't think they're going to give it to Mac Jones. So yeah, I actually don't hate that. I do think A&M's defense has enough talent. I mean, you have guys. First of all, you have experience. They have eight guys back out of 11 on defense, and then some of these listed backups are dudes who we liked a lot, right? I mean, DeMarvin Leal is technically not starting for them. He's the number one backup at both of the defensive end spots. If Missouri could kind of get Alabama off schedule, now it didn't matter because Alabama got back on schedule via just chucking to Jalen. But if Missouri could do it, I do think A&M can do it. I'm just not sure. I mean, there is the whole Nick Saban is, 19-0 all-time against his former assistants with an average score of 45-10 or whatever that is. That's concerning if you're about to bet A&M, just because Saban seems to keep a book on everybody who ever worked for him. But I think A&M's defense could be salty here, and I did bet the under on this on Monday when they came out on the Buds Bets column, and that's since moved in our direction. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, this will be. I mean, I agree with what you're saying on A&M, and I think too. Like when you look back at that Vanderbilt A&M game, like and in some ways A&M, they slowed the pace down. They also handed Vanderbilt an extra possession when they fumbled or got a safety on a punt return of all things. And at the end of the day, Vandy only had 255 yards of offense. And honestly made a few plays on third down to just stay on the field a few times that, you probably would expect A&M to win most of those. And so this is going to be, I still think this is, and I think there's some young players you mentioned, like there's guys like Edgerrin Cooper, who's a linebacker that's going to start to flash the more the season progresses. There's, Jalen Jones going to start to flash the more the season progresses, a true freshman corner. Like they're talented enough. Like the defense is built in a place where it is, it needs to be to compete in these sort of games. So I think the defense is there to at the level it needs to be. It's just the offense that has to answer the bell.
I'm going 31-17.
Sounds like a reasonable score.
Which means I'm probably going to end up betting A&M. I need to kind of like hype myself up to do it.
What's the total at right now?
Total is 51.5. I bet it 54.5. So,
yeah, that does seem like a number.
I mean, a lot of it's going to depend on pace. If Jimbo steps on the pace, comes out and doesn't play slow, bucks his recent trend, then Bama might say, okay, yeah, we'll play pace too. But honestly, I think Nick Saban is extremely comfortable as a defensive-minded head coach, which he's one of the more offensive-minded defensive dudes out there. But if he's like, oh, you guys want to play a little relaxed defensive game, I get time to get all my calls in, and I get to use my offensive line and run the ball with Najee, and we'll throw some play action at Jalen. I'm okay, guys. Yeah, I mean, if you insist, we'll go ahead and do that a little bit. That's fine. Like, I know he's equipped to play these up-tempo games, but, like, I don't think Nick wants to play a game where he's having to defend 90 plays, even if his own offense gets 90.
It's like a little throwback game for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he'd be comfortable there.
Yeah. All right. So I've got a couple more on my list if you want to go through these.
Let's roll.
But I brought up A&M Bama. I guess technically that was both of ours. Oklahoma at Iowa State. Dude, there's no time for Oklahoma to lick its wounds. Like, they got to go and be ready, because if they lose this, they're out of the playoff for sure, and they're probably out of the conference championship game. They're only favored by, like, touchdown on the road, and I've got questions, honestly, about both these defenses. Like, Iowa State's secondary at times, and their run defense has been sketchy. Oklahoma's defensive line was the biggest problem I had in that entire game, really, because, like, Kansas State had to replace all 5 offensive linemen. Arkansas State's D-line gave them a ton of trouble, and yet Oklahoma only had 5 tackles for loss and 1 sack in the ballgame. Like, what are they just gonna? Is Oklahoma's defensive line just gonna suck this year until they get these dudes back? Like, can none of these guys play?
So their best players aren't playing this year, or at least aren't playing yet, right? Ronnie Perkins isn't in there. Jalen Redmond opted out. If you're betting on this team to have found a defensive line, those guys have to be a pretty big factor in that, and they're just not there. So, they already weren't that good, and now their best players aren't there. And so, the defense is going to have its issues. I think this one, but this one, if you are looking for, like, as I look at this, like, the thing I feel fairly confident on is there will be points scored. He's going to continue to get set. Like, Brock Purdy hadn't played a good game yet, really. And so, he's due at some point. The run game, Breece Hall actually really found it last week at the run game for Iowa State. And Iowa State's defense has been a little bit more spotty than we would have expected. Meanwhile, like, Oklahoma, nothing is surprising about what's happened offensively for Oklahoma. They're moving the ball. They're just turning it over a little bit more. So, and that's to be expected when you got inexperienced guys, young players finding their way. I think they'll move the ball again, and they may turn it over a couple times again. But I think that Oklahoma will be able to find the end zone in this game. Seth McGowan's going to be fine. Spencer Rattler is going to get a. He's looked sharp. He just has had a few misses. I'm like this feels like a game where I could see Oklahoma running away from Iowa State, or I could see Iowa State pulling up. Was it last year? It was a 42-41 was the final? Like I could see something like that in this game as well. What's the total here? 62.5?
62.5. Honestly, like the more I listen to you, the more I already took Oklahoma in this game and laid 6.5, only because I was like, all right, I don't want anything, 2 scores, no thank you. But when it finally got down to 6.5, I was like, all right, I saw what Max Duggan did to Iowa State's defense. I certainly like Oklahoma's passing offense better than I like TCU's. No offense to TCU, of course. I just think Oklahoma can outscore them. But man, the more I think about this, I need to play an over here too. I'm going to add that.
I mean, my initial reaction to the number was, okay, I get it. Oklahoma had, didn't look great against Kansas State. Iowa State's been known to play them tough. But I was leaning Oklahoma on this as well. And granted, Iowa State, they played them close last year. Was it 2 years ago? They beat them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this obviously Matt Campbell kind of has Lincoln Riley's number to a certain degree, but I also I think that in a lot of ways, like this Oklahoma offense is just getting lathered up. Like they're just getting, in their a little bit. And so I think that they'll keep on getting sharper. And what has Iowa State shown us to make us think that that defense is going to be stout this year? So we'll see. I mean, I think, but I'm kind of on the OU overplay there as well.
I like that. The only real concern I would have there is if both teams really stick with running the ball. I mean, you can run on Iowa State this year. Louisiana did it. TCU had some running success against them. And I think Oklahoma could probably run it against them. And then you can definitely run the ball on Oklahoma this year, even though the two offenses they played, Missouri State and Kansas State, have been, rather poor. Iowa State's actually run the ball well this year. That was one of my main preseason questions for them. It's like, can Iowa State run it all? Because their passing game last year and the scrambling ability of Purdy really kept them alive. This year, Breece Hall is actually like carrying the load and running the ball well for them. That's my only real concern with an over here is like, what if both these teams just run the ball a lot more than normal and don't push the tempo quite as much and the clock runs. But I guess if you're giving up 10, 12 yards a chunk, the clock's going to stop anyway for the first down chase. So
yeah, I don't think I'd be surprised if Kansas State has a really good offense this year.
They don't. Like I think we saw enough of them against Arkansas State to know that Kansas State's offense is not going to be good.
Like they've found a nice little gadget in Deuce Vaughn, and he's fun and a great player. But look, I mean, they got they had their success last week in sort of these chunk plays. The offensive line, as you mentioned, got beat up against Arkansas State. I don't know that. I think Iowa State is much more equipped to bring consistent offensive success as opposed to this sort of all or nothing type of game that we saw in Kansas State. And so this is I don't know how many stops either of these teams are going to get, honestly.
All right, we got one more before we go no huddle. That's Auburn, Georgia. I'll let you lead off on this one.
Yeah, I think for me, Georgia to me found a quarterback, and it's just and it's from talking to Rusty Manziel, it doesn't sound like we're going to see JT Daniels this week. It's still going to be the Stetson and/or Dwan Mathis show, more than likely. But I think that Georgia did find a quarterback last week. It might not be the flashy quarterback that many had hoped when JT Daniels and Jamie Newman came roaring into town, but they found a quarterback that can operate Georgia's offense and stabilize things in a way that obviously Dwan Mathis really couldn't. And so, all right, so now we just know what Georgia is. They're just sort of the same old boring Georgia, but same old boring Georgia has been really good. So where are the matchups? Where are the issues? We know how good that Georgia defense is. The offensive line for Auburn is a little bit rebuilt. And while they don't – like Georgia's defense still doesn't like create a whole lot of havoc plays behind the line of scrimmage. They're really good. They're really deep. They're stout. I don't think Auburn's going to be able to run the ball very effectively. They didn't against Kentucky. And so in a game that's probably going to be pretty low scoring, I probably have more confidence in Georgia in week 2 under the experienced but low ceiling quarterback Stetson Bennett to just sort of grind out a few tough yards than maybe I do with Auburn. I don't know if that's the right play or that's the right mentality. I got a couple more days to think through it. But aside from Seth Williams just going out and mossing someone and making a few plays like that, like I still think I have more confidence in Georgia offensively against a young Auburn defensive front than like vice versa.
So this is kind of like best unit on the field theory, which kind of states like, all right, in the absence of any of the units on the field just being completely incompetent, and I don't think Georgia's offense is good yet. It may still be good, but I don't think it's good yet.
No,
I
agree.
In the absence of any of these units on the field being totally incompetent, go with the one that has like the absolute best unit, which is Georgia's defense. It was already the best defense in the country last year, arguably. I think this year, I went. It was actually on last night. I had it on in the background while I was watching the debate, so I was kind of double screening it. And you're right, Georgia did not create a ton of havoc plays yet, but one thing they did do a tremendous job of, I thought, was compressing the pocket against Arkansas. Like Felipe Franks never looked all that comfortable back there. They weren't actually getting to him and sacking him, but they were keeping him in the pocket. They were making him uncomfortable within that pocket as it compressed around him. And then the couple plays Arkansas made were really good plays. I mean, Georgia was making them execute at a high level. And I'm actually fairly high on Arkansas's offense this year. So I was impressed by what Georgia did to their offense. I'm not sure that I'm totally ready to buy in on Bennett because of Arkansas's defense. Like, I have no reason to think Arkansas's defense is anything but the worst defense in the SEC at this point. Now, maybe Ole Miss is going to give me a run for my money. But like, they didn't recruit any talent there, not much at least, over the last couple of years. And they have a new scheme. I don't really believe in Arkansas's defense yet. But one thing that concerns me a lot here, and I bet Auburn, I took the 8 when it came out. And I'm not going to lay double digits with Georgia at this point, although I think now it's down like 6.5. So that's a little bit. I wouldn't take 6.5 with Auburn. 8,
but even that, like it still feels like this game like might land right at 6. Like it might be a 14 game or something. And so it feels like 6.5 is a bigger number than like whether Georgia, even with Georgia is the right, like the better team. I just think the margins are going to be very, very slim in this game, and the possessions are going to be really hard fought. And under 1 touchdown it feels like the place this game is going to be played.
I agree. And look, I understand Kirby has had Gus's number. The one thing that really concerns about Auburn is this, right? Their running backs, Sean Shivers, DJ Williams, Tank Bigsby, 22 carries, 65 yards. I mean, that's against Kentucky. I'm a believer that Bo Nix is better this year. I'm a believer that Chad Morris is going to make that offense better this year. If Bo Nix has to throw the ball 45 times to beat Georgia, I might be in trouble, man, because I don't know that I believe in him that much against that defense. And I know there's no fans in the stands or limited fans or whatever, but Auburn has got to find a way to get something out of their run game because you can't put it all on Bo Nix to go beat that defense just chucking the ball.
And I think those guys are good players. I think but if that offensive line couldn't find out a few holes against Kentucky, and I think Kentucky's got a good defensive front, so it's not a slight on Kentucky, but Georgia's is better. And so, I think that's going to be a big matchup. Can Auburn's offensive line get better, get more physical? But I think either way, both of these teams in the same way Gus Malzahn in these early season games, he likes winning these games 17-13. He likes taking these to the last possession, and Kirby just likes taking all games to the last possession. The deeper in the season it gets, the more it seems like Auburn is open to just like, let's just go wild and just play in the 30s. But early in the year, seems like every season Auburn is into these very low scoring, tightly wound games, and Georgia is very comfortable in that pool as well.
Think back to when we had those games against LSU traditionally on the schedule very early. Like they were always like grinded, like the Fournette versus whomever was Auburn quarterback at the time. They were always kind of grinded out games. Barton, we got to go. We got to do an ad read real fast, and let's go no huddle, go mailbag, and then go one big recruiting thing, and get out of here on this Wednesday. All right, guys, and we're back. Appreciate that. 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts, if you could be so kind. If you're listening to us, maybe embedded on 247sports.com or wherever, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and coming soon, Amazon Music, so you can listen to us on your Alexa or Echo or whatever that is, and really potentially annoy your wife in the house as you listen to us without headphones on. So we got a couple more games here. We're going to call this no huddle. This is where we just go like 30 seconds on each, say what we want to learn real fast, and then we'll drop into this mailbag. Let's lead it off. You had one here you wanted to talk about real fast up in your neck of the woods.
I'm kind of fascinated with Vandy LSU. I think that Vandy surpassed everyone's expectations by playing Texas A&M close as a 30-point dog. LSU underwhelmed as a 17-point favorite in a loss against Mississippi State. But a couple of things that stuck out about the Vandy game is they're like PFF graded Vanderbilt's defensive line performance one of the best in the country in last weekend. Their offensive line was like they weren't putting together a bunch of chunk plays. They weren't their yard per play average wasn't great, but they gave them a chance in a way I didn't think that they could with a true freshman quarterback. Todd Fish, the offensive coordinator, I thought was really savvy, finding a way to short, really more of a spread guy. They were possessing the football in a way that really giving them a chance. I think the Vanderbilt is much more competitive than we gave them credit for coming into the year. That said, much more difficult matchup here with LSU. And I think LSU, as it tries to get right, is potentially in a position to do exactly to Vanderbilt what it wanted to do to LSU, which is smother their wide receivers on the perimeter, be better athletes than them. And even they got to the quarterback. KJ Cassell got rid of the football too quickly. They had some BJ Ojulari, who's the JUCO transfer, whose name I'm blanking on.
Ali Gay.
Yeah. They showed some really defensive line flash. It's just the nature of that offense they weren't really prepared for, and I don't think. And so it'll be fun to see what kind of bounce back each team has after underwhelming and surprising performances for either one. And yet, my hunch here is that this is a come back down to earth moment for Vandy, and perhaps a little bit of a opportunity to let out some frustration for LSU.
I thought about betting LSU here, Barton, just because this may be the cheapest price you get on the Tigers all year. If I could get like a 17, I'd be all in. I want to go real quickly to Memphis SMU. Memphis has not played since the alleged party bus deal, and they've had a couple games postponed or canceled. With SMU this year, I wanted to see if their defense would be any better. I think in order for them to take the next step, they have to be able to make some stops against a team with a pulse. Memphis, I just want to see how do they look after such a long COVID layoff. And with Memphis or with SMU, I want to see do they get any stops. So that's what I'm wanting to learn there. I'm very confident both offenses will score. Just how much scoring?
UVA Clemson. UVA will be, I think, a worthy. Well, I don't know about worthy. It'll be a decent test at the least for Clemson's reworked uber talented but young defensive line. Because Virginia's offensive line, I think we both agree, it's very experienced. I think Brendan Armstrong is a legit starting winning quarterback for Virginia. I don't know whether Virginia's going to be able to keep up with Clemson on the other side of the ball. But can they hang on to it a little bit? Can they get some drives? Can they shorten the game? I think that this will be I don't expect some sort of upset alert, but I think it'll be an opportunity to learn more about Clemson than we've had to this point against Wake.
I did go ahead and bet UVA plus 28.5 when it came out. I thought that was a good number. And I also UVA is not going to play roll up tempo. So they have a chance to keep that thing within the number just due to limited possessions. And the final one I want to watch is Baylor, West Virginia, because I don't know anything about Baylor yet, man. Like, I know that they didn't totally shit the bed against Kansas, but also I think there's only about 5 or 6 teams in the country who have played so far who are actually worse than the Jayhawks. And I'm going to keep betting against Kansas until Vegas realizes that this is not a Power 5 quality team this year. But because of that, I haven't really been able to figure out anything about Baylor. And they also had two kick returns for touchdowns and a safety. So that's 16 points right there that we really didn't get to see their offense operate because their drives got taken away from them, which I'm sure they're very happy about because they're scoring anyway on kickoffs. But like West Virginia, their offense, dude, it got shut down by Okie State's defense. And Okie State's defense might be pretty good, and like keeping your playoff hopes alive there for the Cowboys. But I went ahead and took Baylor. I think I like their roster better than West Virginia, and I'm going to learn a lot about both these teams. Specifically, like, can Baylor create explosive passing plays? Because last year they could often enough, and against Kansas, sort of a lack of them relative to how bad Kansas's defense is. So
what's that Baylor number at?
Let me see here. I took it at 2.5, and I think it's at 3. But it's a cheap 3, so it's like 3 minus 105 if you care about saving $5.
I got you. Yeah, because I still think that West Virginia is a really competitive team, and I think Neil Brown's going to get a win against somebody good somewhere along the way. But this will be our first chance to really get a better feel for Baylor at the very least, to know if that is actually one of those good teams.
All right, we got about 10 minutes here.
Yeah,
Mailbag time. This is from Rob Cope. Go ahead and read it because it's directed to me, I guess.
Great pod, fellas. Gator fan here. Question for you, bud. What is going to have to happen for you to change your opinion about non-quarterback transfers? You MF hater. That's not in there, but that's implied. Florida has added key pieces like Van Jefferson and John Grenard, who filled huge needs and became early round picks. In the star count of the current transfers, Cox, Shorter, Lingard look even better. I see no other way for a new head coach to overcome inherited imbalanced class departures and holes in their rosters.
So, all right, I think Rob's question has a couple parts that are worth addressing. I think he's largely referring to what we talked about when we did the transfer ratings, which was mostly done by me, and then Barton reviewed them and was like, hey, these couple, like, we need to take a second look at, and I'm very happy that he did because that was quite the undertaking. We know for a fact that, like, transfer quarterbacks can still get taken pretty highly in the draft, at least based on recent sample, whereas transfer players at other positions typically transfer because something wrong was going on with their career. Not always, right? Grad transfers are a little bit different. Guys who transfer up are a little bit different. But for the most part, coaches seem to have an easier time figuring out who the right player is to start at a position that's not quarterback. Sometimes they just make the wrong call at quarterback, maybe more frequently than they do at other spots. And so you see some transfers there that end up working out at a bit higher rate than you do at other positions. I went and looked here. The two Florida transfers for this year's team that we put 4 stars on, Cox and Stuart Reese, we did end up giving Reese 4 stars. They started and looked good for the Gators. Shorter and Lingard, I think we gave them like high 3 stars, and I'm not aware of them doing much at all against a bad Ole Miss defense, and I'm not even sure where they are on the 2 deep. I think Lingard had I saw him catch, or not Lingard, rather. I think Shorter had a screen catch And we'll see. I mean, look, I'll eat crow if I'm wrong on those guys, but through 1 week, I'm pretty confident that we got them right, or at least the order of them right, like who we had higher, who we had lower. And to his other point, in my opinion, yeah, like you do have to be good at the transfer market if you want to flip a roster faster. I just don't think you can continually build your team on transfers.
I would contend that it's not you, Bud, that has, the incorrect opinion about transfers. It's Rob Cope, respectfully, that has the incorrect opinion about the rankings process, because it ultimately just boils down to the same old thing we always talk about, which is like the idea that a 3-star is somehow like a player you don't want. You can get a positive impact from a 3-star prospect, is what we ranked Lingard and Shorter. That just is a value add to your team without those guys becoming NFL draft picks. And that happens to market all the time. But when we're ranking guys coming out of high school, we are casting a big net and trying to collect as many future NFL draft picks in that 4-star range as we can. And in the transfer portal, we're doing the same thing, but it's you have a bigger body of work to then evaluate in terms of what they knowledge. So you can narrow that focus a little bit, and you can make more educated decisions, and you should, and we do, consider what kind of feedback we're like. There's nothing that says Justin Shorter has done anything to indicate he is going to be an NFL receiver. And that I hope he does. I'm not trying to hate on Justin Shorter, but we've seen him. He couldn't get on the field as a freshman coming off an injury. He, as a redshirt freshman, he got on the field a little bit and really, frankly, showed some issues tracking the ball downfield and catching the ball cleanly. And it's just he's just going to have to prove, like, you don't just get to carry these rankings forever. So Cox, yeah, he balled out. Reese balled out. Like, those guys are 4-star guys. There's a lot of transfers that are making impact. Khalil Herbert was a 4-star transfer from Kansas who had 100 yards on 6 carries in his first week. But, Tate Martell, we kept the 4-star on when he went from Ohio State to Miami. We shouldn't have. Like, he should have been reevaluated and reassessed in a more critical way as someone that just hadn't shown the indications that he was going to hit what his initial projection was thought to be, which is really high. So I think it's a continued sort of effort to try to get people to reframe the way they think about the ranking system as more than just it's a 4-star bust.
All right, one big recruiting thing here. Jake Garcia, I loved your tweet on this. Jake Garcia, who had transferred from California to Georgia to play for Probst at Valdosta.
4-star USC commit.
Yeah, quarterback, and gives an interview to, was it ESPN or?
I think it was ESPN. I think his dad gave it or something, maybe.
And they basically explained how they kind of found a loophole with divorce in the Georgia high school eligibility transfer stuff. And turns out that they ended up investigating that, and he is now not eligible to play. I mean, look, sucks for the kid, obviously. We're not trying to bag on Jake Garcia, but that's not great for his development for him not to be able to play his senior year. So certainly, disappointing news there.
Right, but a lot of these Cali, I guess, chance he may not have played anyways. A lot of these Cali kids are not getting an opportunity to play their senior seasons. I just think it's a little bit comical, and I mean, I say it tongue in cheek, but I'm kind of serious. Like, if your family, if your parents are willing to literally divorce with plans of getting back together after your senior season and separate for the fall, one of them move across the country with you to Georgia, then I don't know, maybe just let the guy play. Like that seems like a lot of effort that's well earned to get a senior season out of this thing. So hey, I don't knock that hustle. That's a good effort.
I mean, like, imagine if you and Haley split just so one of your girls can go play for Brentwood South Little League All Stars for the softball World Series, and then they're like, nope. I mean, that would. Gosh.
That's a lot of work. That's a lot of paperwork for just one game or whatever Jake Garcia got in.
Oh man, I wonder if California is a community property state. So, all right, 4 big commitments we should talk about here. Deion Colzie to Notre Dame, Diego Pounds to North Carolina, Rod Orr to Florida State, and Philip Riley to USC. I'll take the bottom two there if you want to lead off with the top two with Colzie and Pounds.
So I thought the big thing with Deion Colzie, he's a one-time Notre Dame commit out of Georgia, decommitted and recommitted now to Notre Dame. But he's big. He's got pretty good like testing numbers at that size. He doesn't necessarily play as fast as I'd like to on film, but he is legitimately like a strong tester with some elite athletic upside. And I think when you look at Notre Dame's roster, that's sort of the one it's missing. It's got great running backs. It's got good offensive line. It's got good tight end. Doesn't have that outside guy. So I think that's a big get for Notre Dame. Diego Pounds, offensive tackle from North Carolina, commits to North Carolina. I haven't looked at the numbers. I guess I could pull it up right now. But North Carolina is absolutely on a warpath in the state in terms of just cleaning up and recruiting. And and Diego Pounds, another one that had interest from a lot of big-time programs, including some like Big Ten powerhouses. North Carolina as a class is up to 13 commits in state, and I think they've got most of the guys in the top of the ranking. So a great indicator for what's to come for Mac Brown in terms of his in-state recruiting.
Absolutely agree there. By the way, if you want to know where Penn State turns, check out the Lions 247 podcast. They did a whole episode on missing out on Pounds because Penn State certainly thought they were going to get him up until probably the last day of Pounds' recruitment. So Rod Orr to Florida State, obviously you've probably heard me talk about, and if you've watched any Florida State games over like the last, 3 years, you may have noticed they have an offensive line issue. They need to recruit to fix that in the long term. Rod Orr is a guy, he's actually not that great of a player right now, but he does have a lot of upside. Former basketball dude, like 6'6"-ish, can bend, athletic for his size, has the length that you're looking for there at tackle. And Coach Alex Atkins got on him early for the Noles. He was the play caller at Charlotte for Will Healy and is now the offensive line coach for Norvell there, kind of a rising guy in the profession. And he got on him early and worked the relationship a lot. And ultimately and then Dillingham as well, who was at Auburn and knew of Orr. And they ended up getting him over Tennessee and a couple other schools that were decent schools. Not like it wasn't like a Georgia-Alabama battle type thing. But I know they're really happy to get him. And then Philip Riley is a versatile DB. He's actually from the West Coast, and he plays now in Florida, but a very bright kid. He was committed to
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame, that's right. And then he ends up flipping to USC. So one for the Trojans there in that rivalry. And, I think we should do this. This one big recruiting thing. This is how I want to keep people engaged with recruiting who are not big-time recruiting fans, throughout the year. And then as we get closer to signing day, we'll shift and talk more macro recruiting stuff. So I think that's it, man. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, man. Let's we'll talk again on Sunday. Hopefully,
Yes,
hopefully another wild weekend to come. Bring it on. The wilder, the better.
Let's drop those dominoes. See you, buddy.